I'm going to shift gears here real quick, Chairman, and I want to go back to something, Dr. Bernstein, that you talked about that I thought was really on point, was just connecting small communities, rural communities, small towns to supply chains. And I think a lot of what we see, these disruptive trends, have to do with the unequal connection to the marketplace, to many different resources that you see in geographically different parts of the country. So I wanted to turn that towards infrastructure and talk about, ask what is the role of infrastructure and how should we be prioritizing that to greater increase access, whether it's to a supply chain, whether it's to the marketplace, for the geographic parts of the country that have limited access to it, and maybe talk a little bit about the places where public-private partnerships work in infrastructure. Airports are a great example. And the places where we're just going to have to do direct investment, because a water project in rural Wyoming, rural New Mexico, we're not going to be able to attract private capital at the return rates to make those kinds of things happen.
Well, I just wanted to start where you ended, which is that there is, I think, a growing kind of attention to an idea, and I know the Trump administration is pushing this, an infrastructure program that looks to me like it's wholly based on public-private partnerships, wherein you provide a pretty hefty, I would argue, wasteful tax credit in many cases to infrastructure that would have been built anyway, and the only investors that are going to come to that well are those who are investing in projects that spin off some kind of a return, ergo a user fee. And a lot of the places we're trying to focus on today, that's not going to be the case. I thought Ms. Maloney's example was a really interesting one. She talked about how a subway line generated more economic activity. Well, that's in New York City. The same thing happens when you build a cloverleaf off of an expressway in a rural area. You don't have to be in New York City. This generates connections and economic activity, but you're not going, that's going to have to be, that's got to be a public good, and that's got to be thought about, in my view, as a traditional infrastructure program. You're not going to do, you're not going to be able to tap that through a tax credit public-private partnership.
Jared makes good points. I've been not able to comment on the infrastructure question. I would just approach it cautiously. I'm probably less a fan because I think it can be abused. And having, based at Stanford University and being out in California for the last few years, I think the massive rail project out there that looks like a horrible boondoggle that probably will never come to fruition and will cost people of Ohio money because federal money's, gone into that program as well. I think often small communities, rural communities get left out of the infrastructure programs. Looks great, tends to go to bigger areas, better connected. And so I would just be cautious about it. But I think Jared makes a really important point. And that some of the most important infrastructure we have are our national parks, for example, and we don't quantify those. And we're guilty as economists. We don't quantify some of the intangible values in life. And so it's not always that you need to build, lay down some more asphalt as a way to invest in what's important to Americans.